Hello and welcome to the Fantasy Life Show. I'm your host, Ian Hartitz. It is a great day to be great. It's a great day to break down every single Week 7 matchup with one thing that myself and the man joining me today, Matthew Freedman, happened to find cool. So yes, new format here on our Wednesday show. And I'm excited, Freedman. I hope you are too.
Yeah, it's great to be on the Wednesday show, getting to talk about every game. And I love how the idea was, okay, we can't get you, me, and Dwayne to get a showdown to a normal length of time on Thursday. So why don't we put me on Wednesday and then we'll talk about every game. Let's see how that goes. Maybe we can get the show done in an hour, but I think we can.
And again, we are recognizing the fact that, unfortunately cannot spend 3 hours barking at you guys today. So no, we will not be able to get to every factor, but I do maintain we will find some interesting stuff for each and every matchup ahead of Week 7. So going to get to that shortly. First, though, a quick DraftKings opening lines. We got some trade murmurs going around for guys like Jacoby Myers. Also saw the Giants allegedly cut out some interest in Jalen Waddle and Chris Olave. So we'll see what happens there. But the most actionable news, Freedman, really is just the continued updates on injuries. Starting off with quarterback, Kyler Murray limited in practice with the foot issue. Also, Brock Purdy returning to practice with a turf toe, obviously. That said, Mac Jones is also limited. Kyle Shanahan said Brock Purdy is more limited. Also, we are going to see J.J. McCarthy and Carson Wentz both getting reps in practice this week. So honestly, we'll see what happens with all these guys. I'm not overly certain, Freeman, if Kyler, Purdy, or J.J. McCarthy are going to return. Do you have a read on any of these?
I mean, it's just, sticking my finger in the air, as Dwayne might say, and just like guessing. But I with the projections that we have right now, I'm assuming it's JJ McCarthy. I'm assuming it's Brock Purdy, and I'm assuming that it is Kyler Murray. The fact that all of them are practicing, even if it's in limited fashion, practicing the first day of the week is an encouraging sign. So that's the way that I would read this right now. And I would say the difference, though, from Brock Purdy to Mac Jones, like, not to besmirch the great name of Brock Purdy, but we really haven't seen an offensive drop-off with Mac Jones. So obviously, if you have Purdy, you would like for him to be in the lineup. But in terms of all of the other guys in that 49ers offense, I don't know if it really makes a difference whether it's Purdy or Mac Jones. For the other guys, the other offenses, I think it does make a difference. I think we'd probably rather have Carson Wentz throwing the ball rather than J.J. McCarthy at this point in his career. And I do think Jacoby Brissett, it's just one game, but man, he looked better in that Cardinals offense than Kyler Murray to this point in the season. So we just kind of have to see, but I would be interested to see if Brissett actually could help elevate that offense a little bit.
Over in the running back streets, Amari DiMercato not practicing with an ankle. That would condense the Cardinals' three-way split into more of a two-way rotation with Bam Knight handling early downs and, of course, Michael Carter on passing downs. That said, Freedman, the real big running back news is Chuba Hubbard dealing with his calf issue, saying that he does expect to play in Week 7. So Rico Dowdle obviously coming off back-to-back 200-plus yard total efforts. I mean, the dude's been playing amazing. And, the Panthers have said as much that he has earned the right to continue playing. That said, Freedman, when you're under your projection hood trying to figure out what this split is going to look like between Hubbard and Dowdle, what are you thinking?
I mean, I am going to talk about this a little bit more later, but I think Dowdle deserves to be the lead back. I mean, anytime we have seen someone pop off like this, that guy has gotten the opportunity for the rest of the season to be the lead back. It makes me think of Jay Ajayi, like going in the way back time machine, but 2016 Jay Ajayi, Arian Foster was the starter to open the year. Arian Foster got injured. Jay Ajayi took the job over. Arian Foster came back, and Jay Ajayi went off for 2 straight 200-yard games, and Arian Foster literally retired the next day. Like a guy who was like a multiple-time All-Pro, which is like, nah, I'm done. It's this dude's backfield now. I'm not going to say that Dowdle is going to retire Chuba Hubbard, but I think Dowdle definitely deserves the shot to be the lead back at this point.
Second in yards per carry this year behind only Bijan Robinson, also top 3 in yards after contact per carry. So Dowdle certainly made the most out of his opportunities. I will have him ranked just ahead of Chuba Hubbard this week. Of course, not going to be the top 10 running back that he would be, though, without Chuba in the lineup. Unfortunately, we have a laundry list of wide receiver injuries. Not all bad news, though. We do have CeeDee Lamb limited and back at practice, and we are tentatively expecting him to play. Funny quote from Brian Schottenheimer, when asked what CeeDee needs to show in practice to be good to go, said, if he's breathing, I am good. So So positive news there. Also, Terry McLaurin back at practice with that quad issue in a limited fashion, which is good news, especially because Noah Brown is hitting the IR. Marvin Harrison Jr. limited as he continues to work through concussion protocol. Not guaranteed to play this week, but certainly a good sign that he did manage to start the practice without a DMP. Quentin Johnson also expecting to practice, as is Christian Watson, and he is nearing a return. That said, a handful of DMPs. We have Puka Nacua not really expecting to play on Sunday in London. We have Ricky Pearsall with the knee still not making it back to practice. Josh Downs apparently got concussed at some point. He is not practicing. Calvin Ridley with the hamstring not practicing. Calvin Austin ruled out for Thursday night. And Emeka Ibuka with that hamstring issue also not expecting to play. The last good news I will leave you all with is that Dave Canales says the plan is for Jalen Coker to play through his quad injury and return to action this week. So shout out to all of our Coke heads out there ready to see Jalen Coker back out there doing his thing. Over in the tight end streets, George Kittle with his hamstring injury will have his practice window open. I would be shocked if he is not back by at least week 8 because I believe that is National Tight End Day, but hopefully he can return in week 7. Also, David Njoku and Brock Bowers not practicing. So again, a lot going on at wide receiver, Freeman. I'm sure we're going to talk about plenty of those as we get through the games. I will say, though, this David Njoku situation really is worth monitoring because if he is going to be missing even a game or two with that knee, I mean, I've already seen your ranks, man. Everyone else can at fantasylife.com, but Harold Fannin will be an immediate top 10 option, particularly against this Dolphins defense.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about Fannin more in a little bit, but I will say the David Njoku news, I don't think he's playing this week, and it would not be a surprise if at some point he's traded. It feels like there's just a rebuild that is going on, and it really needs to go on with the Cleveland Browns, and I would expect that at some point we see Shedeur Sanders as well. But yeah, David Njoku I would expect to be out, and I think that means the passing game will continue to really focus on Harold Fannin and then also Jerry Jeudy.
And finally, Bengals defensive end Trey Hendrickson officially questionable for Thursday Night Football with that hip issue, so something to keep an eye on there. And with that, guys, let's get into our matchup by matchup breakdown. This has been our DraftKings opening lines. First, though, a quick word to our friends at DraftKings because I have teamed up with DraftKings Sportsbook to bring you the ultimate way to tip off this NBA season. Right now, new customers who bet just $5 will get $300 in bonus bets if your bet wins and 3 more months of NBA League Pass on us. That's right. New customers bet $5, get $300 in bonus bets if your bet wins, plus 3 months of NBA League Pass on us. All you have to do is download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and sign up using the promo code FANTASYLIFE. The crown is yours. Stack your bonus bets on same-game parlays, player props, money line spreads, and more, or stay in the action with live betting that brings every play to life. So here is your play. Download DraftKings Sportsbook, sign up with promo code FANTASYLIFE, bet just $5 and get 3 months of League Pass on us and $300 if your bet wins, paid in bonus bets. Thanks to DraftKings Sportsbook for sponsoring this. Let's make this NBA season one to remember. Going through every single week 7 matchup here on the Fantasy Life show. We're going to be going through kind of the highest to lowest game totals. But first, Freedman, we are going to kick things off with Thursday Night Football. The Bengals taking on the Steelers, who are going to go ahead and be 5.5-point road favorites. Game total resting, though, at a lowly 43.5, as we tend to see in some of these AFC North rock fights. So starting off with the Steelers, Freedman, you want to talk about Aaron Rodgers, who, don't look now, is leading the most efficient Steelers passing game in the last 6 years.
Yeah, you mentioned in your early rankings piece that this really is the best offense we've seen from the Steelers since the Ben Roethlisberger era. And, I was obviously impressed with what Aaron Rodgers did in the hashtag revenge game against the Jets in week 1. Since then, he hasn't been quite as good, but man, he looked good last week in week 5 or week 6 coming out of the week 5 bye, 235 yards, 2 touchdowns, 70% completion rate, 9.2 adjusted yards per attempt. And then this week, he faces the Bengals, number 29 in defensive dropback success rate. And then, as you mentioned, Trey Hendrickson, their star edge rusher, he might be out. Shamar Stewart with the ankle injury also could be out. So the Steelers notable favorites to win the AFC North. I think the big picture question is I don't want to ask, is this team legit? Because it's Mike Tomlin. They're probably going to win 9 to 10 games, but Aaron Rodgers, I think, is actually looking like a pretty good version of himself. From 2015 to 2019, a 5-year span, he had 7.7 adjusted yards per attempt. And that's not looking at him when he was good. That was the 5-year span between when he won his second and third MVPs, which is actually such a ridiculous thing to say. Like, oh, he's won so many MVPs, like he's got a 5-year span between them. But this year, 7.9 adjusted yards per attempt. Like, he's basically performing at the version of 2015 to 2019 Aaron Rodgers, which is still a really good quarterback. And this week, that guy's good enough to be a streamer against a really bad Bengals pass defense.
Consensus QB 20. Again, if you guys are trying to fill that bye week from Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson, you could do worse than Rodgers here on Thursday night. Over with the Bengals, guys, I do want to say the time to buy low on T. Higgins is right now. I just think we're looking at an offense where, yes, T. Higgins remains good at football. Joe Flacco is better at Jake Browning in football. And as Freedman said, this defense is horrible. So I don't think they're going to do, again, exactly the same sort of heights we've seen in past years with Joe Burrow under center. But even an upper middle class man's version, even a middle class man's version could still be enough to warrant buying T. Higgins at his wide receiver 3 price tag. So I would trade Chris Olave, Jordan Addison, Devonta Smith, Jameson Williams for him. I actually just acquired T. Higgins in my home league for the price of Jordan Mason with Aaron Jones coming back. So a lot of good options in that range. And I really do think we could see the boom as early as this Thursday night. I was looking at some man zone splits this morning, trying to see, what wide receivers are really just standing out and demanding a lot more targets against man coverage. And the 3 that stuck out, Rashid Shaheed, Tedero McMillan, and yes, T. Higgins. Steelers have run the 3rd highest man coverage rate in the league this year. I do think we'll see Jalen Ramsey mostly on Jamar Chase, hopefully letting T. Higgins feast and put together his first boom matchup of the season. So get your popcorn ready for that Thursday night game. But Freedman, let's face it, arguably the most entertaining game on the slate is going to take place in Jerry World. We got the Cowboys hosting the Commanders, who are 2-point road favorites with a sky-high 54.5-point game total. Freedman, the Cowboys are the 4th team since 2000 right now to be combining to average in terms of their points and their points allowed 60-plus points per game. Pure cinema, for everyone other than Cowboys fans.
Yeah, as you mentioned, the total is 54.5. I think it's the highest mark of the year. But in our game models, we have the over at the bet there. 56.8 is the projection. The Cowboys number 3 in points scored, number 31 in points allowed. That just means a ton of points for everybody. And the guy who stands out to me is George Pickens. I know that CeeDee Lamb seems likely to return, but even with Lamb returning, I'm still super interested in Pickens. He has shown himself to be a legit alpha wide receiver who's worthy of being ranked in the top 12, regardless of whether CeeDee Lamb is out there or not. A 91 utilization score is what he's had without Lamb out there. Now, obviously, he's not going to see that kind of usage moving forward, but with the production he's had, and then with just how pass heavy the Cowboys been and with how quickly they play, there is still room for multiple guys in that pass offense to produce. And now going against the Commanders, who are number 5 in largest fantasy boost allowed to wide receivers. It was with the Steelers, but last year Pickens had 91 yards and a touchdown going against that Washington defense, coordinated or overseen rather by head coach Dan Quinn. So I just think it's going to be a really great spot. And then one more nugget here. With Dak Prescott at quarterback, the Cowboys have smashed divisional opponents. 30-13 against the spread is what we've seen out of the Cowboys. That is just an unreal split there. So I think we see something like that continue. I think multiple Cowboys end up scoring a lot of fantasy points.
Dominant stuff from the Cowboys offense, which leads the league, I believe, in total yards per game. The problem is their defense is seemingly as bad as the Cowboys offense is good, accordingly setting up all these Commanders for some pretty good games. So Bill Krosky-Merritt actually has the week's best advantage in terms of rushing yards before contact per carry when you're combining the offense and defensive metrics. Feeling good about his usage. He is a consensus top 20 running back. Hopefully Terry McLaurin's going to be back out there. It would be a situation where maybe we treat him a little bit more as a boomer bust wide receiver 3 in that first game back. Would still be giving Deebo Samuel the benefit of the doubt, but not to pour cold water on this situation because you're still starting him in fantasy and everything. But Jaden Daniels, guys, hasn't exactly been the same world beater that we saw his rookie season. Okay, this is true in terms of pretty much any advanced stat you want to look at. Last year in EPA per play, he was 6th. This year, he's 15th. His success rate's fallen from 13th to 20th. His QBR was the 4th best mark in the league last year, just 20th through 6 weeks of action. So I know Terry's been banged up, but even before then, and maybe it was because Terry was, kind of holding out during during August and everything. We just haven't quite seen this offense clicking at the same high level as they did last year. But hey, as we've seen throughout the entire season, what is the best get-right spot any struggling offense could ask for? It is playing this Cowboys defense. So wouldn't be surprised again if we see that, quote unquote issue resolved in a big way here this Sunday. Moving on to Monday Night Football, Freedman. This is the good one. This is the 7 p.m. kickoff on Monday Night Football that we can all get behind. The Lions are 5.5-point home favorites against Baker MV Payfield. I'll work on that one. But yeah, Lions Buccaneers, 52.5-point game total. What do you want to talk about with the Buccaneers, Freedman?
I mean, there's so many guys I like in this game. Rashad White, expect to, basically be his Studley self with no Bucky Irving. Sterling Shepard, we might see Mike Evans return. We might not, but Sterling Shepard going to continue, I think, to capitalize on the hashtag shower narrative that he's had with Baker Mayfield going back to their days in Oklahoma. But, Cade Otton also really stands out to me. For one glorious month last year, he looked like one of the best tight ends in the league. Of course, that coincided with a number of wide receivers on the team, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin being out. We have a similar situation now. Mike Evans, not certain he's returning. Chris Godwin, definitely out. Emeka Egbuka, probably out. Jalen McMillan on IR, yet to play this year. Without Evans, for the past few weeks, we've had a 61 utilization score. That's not like amazing, but that's way better than what we were getting out of Cade Otton before. And then last week, with both Evans and Godwin out, Otton played literally every snap, ran every route of the game. And now he's going against the Lions, who will be without strong safety Brian Branch because of the suspension incurred from the fight from Sunday Night Football. So I think it's a situation where Otton could approach double-digit targets if Evans is out, but we just have to wait and see on that.
Tons of cornerback injuries continuing to impact Detroit as well. So very banged up secondary over there. Similar sentiment, though, in Tampa Bay. We did have Zion McCollum out last week with the thumb issue, and also second-round pick Benjamin Morrison continuing to miss time with that hamstring injury. So, again, really is setting up as this sort of back-and-forth shootout because I'm not so sure either of these pass defenses can actually contain the other passing game. So, in this one, just looking at the Buccaneers defense specifically, really for the entirety of the last, 4 or 5 years, we've seen this be one of the more pronounced pass funnel defenses in the NFL, and that has not changed this season. Nobody has been better in terms of EPA allowed per rush than Vita Vea and company. That said, Tampa Bay sinks all the way to 20th when looking at EPA allowed per dropback. So Jared Goff, Amon-Ra St. Brown, obviously feeling great about them. And maybe Jameson Williams can make it 2 booms in as many weeks here. I do think maybe the biggest boost, though, deserves to go to Sam Laporta because this is a defense that, again, is bottom 6 in terms of EPA and passer rating allowed on targets to tight ends. So can't quite put Sam Laporta in that ever-shrinking tight end circle of trust, but certainly feeling good about him. And he is accordingly in our top 5 consensus tight ends ahead of week 7. Moving right along, Freedman, we have the Chargers hosting the Colts as 1.5-point home favorites. Game total resting there at 48.5. So this is a fun one. And I think, we'll get a better idea, if you will, of just how real the Colts are. With all due respect, I mean, they had a nice win over the Broncos in week 2 and everything. So not trying to say they haven't played anyone, but Chargers certainly are going to be a worthy opponent. We'll see how banged up the Chargers are, though, Freeman, because we did really see Ladd McConkey take advantage of a inactive Quentin Johnson last week.
Yeah, so part of the production for McConkey last week, as you mentioned, was Quentin Johnson being out. But man, I liked Ladd McConkey last week. I like him again this week. It's, for the second straight game, thinking he could have pretty good production. Last week, he went off the 100 yards and a touchdown on 9 targets. He had a great matchup in the slot. He has a similarly great matchup this week. Starter Kenny Moore hasn't played since week 3 with an Achilles injury, and then backup Mike Hilton is on IR. So he could be going against a third string cornerback in the slot, and perimeter cornerback Charvarius Ward is questionable with a concussion. So McConkey no longer the number 1 wide receiver in this offense, but that's fine. The Colts are number 31 in defensive pass DVOA allowed to number 2 wide receiver. So a good situation for McConkey, where I think he continues the uptick that we saw last week.
Meanwhile, on the Colts side of the football, loving life if you have Jonathan Taylor as your RB1, obviously. And honestly, not too far of a less similar sentiment for Daniel Jones. He is the QB 10 in our consensus ranks. I was, prepared to just try to figure out what wide receiver to prioritize. But given the fact that Downs is in the concussion protocol, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out Michael Pittman is that guy, pal. I will say, though, maybe we do actually get a true boom game out of Tyler Warren. He's been awesome this year, don't get me wrong. But I feel like I look up after the first drive, he's already got 12 or so PPR points. And I'm like, like, oh man, here it comes, the 25-point effort. Just hasn't quite gotten all the way there. That said, guys, when I was mentioning those man and zone splits before, on the other side of things, players who are getting targeted far more often against zone coverage than man coverage, I did see Drake London and Tyler Warren booming there. So I know you're starting them regardless of the opponent, but the Chargers have been pretty good against tight ends. Derwin James, one of the better safeties in the league and everything like that. That said, again, the frequency with which the Colts have been willing to feed the ball to Tyler Warren against zone, now going up against one of the most zone-heavy defenses in the NFL, ladder bets, receiving, totals and all that stuff for Tyler Warren, stuff I will be certainly pounding the over on this week. So good stuff there, Mr. Freedman. Let's move on to the Bears hosting the Saints, 5.5-point home favorites for Chicago's own, looking to improve their win streak to 4 straight. Game total resting at a pretty high here, 47.5. What do you want to talk about with Chicago, Freedman?
So just looking at this team kind of big picture and the game model we have at Fantasy Life, they are a 4-star bet. 5.5 is the consensus line. We have them projected at 8.5. They have a pretty big home field advantage anyway, but then they get a boost because the Saints aren't in division. They play indoors on turf versus outdoors on grass for the Bears. So good things for the Bears, who have improved on offense with head coach Ben Johnson and guys I like in this game, DeAndre Swift and Rome Odunze. Swift, obviously great game on Monday Night Football. And it looked like the Bears this offseason wanted to try to find another running back to challenge Swift in the backfield, but they didn't. And now we've seen Swift through 5 games really be the guy in that backfield. And most importantly, coming out of the week 5 bye into week 6, he maintained his workload, 14 carries, 3 targets. I think he's going to have a similar workload this week as a home favorite. And then Rome Odunze really didn't do much on Monday Night Football, but I'm not worried about it. He was awesome in weeks 1 through 4. The Saints are number 28 in defensive pass DVOA against number 1 wide receivers, and their cornerback Isaac Yiadom might be out this week with a hamstring injury that has sidelined him since week 4. So again, the Bears, all of the guys, and just them as a bet, I'm very interested in.
We'll say Odunze's game would have been bigger if they didn't call another one of these ticky-tack illegal formation penalties. He made a fantastic diving catch for about an 11-yard touchdown. Again, I'm not exactly sure who asked for the NFL to start being so freaking lame about this. Certainly didn't help out Rome Odunze fantasy managers last week. Looking at the Saints, though, guys, last time I'm going to really dive into these man-zone splits. But again, Rashid Shaheed was popping up there with Higgins and T-Mac as the guys who have just been getting targeted way more often against man, 35% targets per route run rate compared to zone, where he's just 14%. And looking at the Bears this year, they actually have run the league's 4th highest rate, I should say, of man coverage. And let's face it, man zone coverage, they haven't been a very good secondary to begin with. Obviously facing a lot of injuries, as are a lot of teams as we get into October football in the NFL. But really do think Shaheed, who honestly has shown off an improved floor this year, he's caught at least 4 passes in every game, could have one of those booms in mind. So already still the wide receiver 36 in PPR points per game. Again, hasn't been busting as much as we're used to seeing. And just this Bears defense, even the man cover stuff aside, has been the worst defense in the league in terms of looking at performance on deep balls thrown at least 20 yards downfield to opposing wide receivers. EPA, passer rating, yards per attempt, completion rate, dead last for the Chicago Bears. So Rashid Shaheed, boom week. You guys heard it here first, maybe second, maybe third. Either way, feeling good about Rashid Shaheed this week. Let's move on to Sunday Night Football, Freedman. A Kyle Shanahan revenge game. We got the 49ers as 2.5-point favorites hosting the Atlanta Falcons, who don't look now are playing some really good football. That said, Freeman, we're going to start with the 49ers. Again, not so sure if it's going to be Brock Purdy or Mac Jones under center. Not saying it doesn't matter, but either way, man, we're expecting a lot of passing production here.
Yeah, I'm looking at Kendrick Bourne, and I will say the George Kittle, I would never say something as stupid as like, I don't want George Kittle to return this week, because obviously you do. You want the best players out there. But if he doesn't return this week, the week 8 return during National Tight End Day would be awesome. And also it gives us one more week to see Kendrick Bourne as like the number 1 wide receiver within that offense, which is kind of intriguing. Brandon Ayuk nowhere close to returning. Jawan Jennings is seemingly injured all over his body. Ricky Pearsall, as you mentioned at the top of the show, still dealing with that knee injury, hasn't suited up since week 4. And of course, Kittle returning to practice this week, but no certainty to play this week. And that means Bourne could be the number 1 wide receiver for a 3rd straight week. And over his past 2 games, man, he has balled out. Like we joke about like the warm blanket, like he's been an electric blanket, like 284 yards receiving, 15 receptions on 20 targets in 2 weeks. Like, I mean, that's not sustainable. That's not like the type of wide receiver he is, but I don't know. I mean, like entering last season, we didn't think Jawan Jennings was a stud wide receiver. And then now we think that he's kind of a good player, although maybe he's not. Maybe Kendrick Bourne is actually going to be the number one wide receiver for the rest of the season. So I'm just interested to see how far this can go. And if Kittle's not there, I think we really see another Kendrick Bourne week.
And again, Ricky Parasol's still not back to practice either. So I'm with you. Assuming those two are out right now in my rankings, I have Kendrick Bourne inside my top 20. Even with the return of Kittle, he would still be inside that top 30 and likely a recommended start to Freeman's point. Over there for the Falcons, look, Bijan Robinson, Drake London are doing their thing. I do think Michael Penix is a quality QB streamer this week because this 49ers defense without Fred Warner and Nick Bosa, again, just so far behind the eight ball at this point. I could see, again, some big time passing numbers coming to fruition. But hey, guys, remember, we got bye weeks going on. We got teams forced to make some tough bench decisions. So if you do have the room, go pick up Tyler Algier. He actually is only rostered on 34% of ESPN teams, also 38% of Yahoo rosters. And again, not that we would be crossing out Bijan's name as the RB1 and putting Tyler Algier there, but I think he could be 75% of Bijan, which would still probably safely have him as a top 15 running back the rest of the way. So again, sky high handcuff upside. Falcons running backs not named Tyler Algier and Bijan Robinson have just 7 touches on the season. So we truly would be looking at a true workhorse role. God forbid anything ever happened to Bijan. Only other handcuffs, I will quickly point out that, again, are rostered in under 35% of ESPN and or Yahoo leagues that you could, again, take a look at. Kendra Miller, Tajay Spears, Jaden Blue, Bashal Tootin, Brian Robinson, Blake Corum, Ollie Gordon, Ray Davis, and Isaiah Davis. So, again, you have that 6 wide receiver you're never going to start or feel good about anyway. I much prefer to try to have some of these handcuff running backs safely stashed on the bench. Let's move on to some AFC West football. Freeman, we got the Chiefs hosting the Raiders as 11.5-point home favorites at Arrowhead. Game total resting here at 45.5. So we will finally be getting the long-awaited return of Rashee Rice. And man, even without Rashee Rice, Chiefs offense has started to party again like it's at least, maybe not 2018, but 2022 or so.
Yeah, I'm super optimistic based on what we have seen out of the Chiefs so far. Obviously, weeks 1 through 3 were kind of disgusting. Weeks 4 through 6, they really turned it around, averaged over 30 points per game in that time. And to your point, it's not 2018, but it has looked a lot like 2022. And then now you insert Rashee Rice as the number one wide receiver within that passing offense. And it's pretty exciting. Now, obviously, he was great as a rookie, great in the playoffs of that rookie stretch run, and then dynamic in the first 3 games of his sophomore season, 288 yards, 2 touchdowns on 29 targets in the first 3 games, and then the week 4 injury, and then the suspension. Finally, we get to see him. And honestly, I think the suspension might be good for him in that it gives him just a little more time to rehab, to get into shape, and then, of course, to let the Chiefs figure out their early season offensive woes. So going against the Raiders, Rice has played them twice against the same defensive coordinator, Patrick Graham, 164 yards, 1 touchdown on 22 targets. I think we see Rice right away function as a wide receiver 1.
I almost hope that he does just to watch the fantasy community lose their freaking minds. But I would not be betting on that, and I am with Freeman. I think Rice will be just fine. Over with the Raiders, obviously, with Brock Bowers, not really expecting to play until after the Raiders' Week 8 bye. Ashton Genty is the only guy who we can really hang our hat on and feel good about. And it was nice to hear Pete Carroll basically confirm that they are looking to feed their, again, star rookie at least 20 carries per week. So good stuff there. Wouldn't be trusting Jacoby Myers very much. Maybe we get some sort of trade showcase. I still maintain he's good at football, but what we saw last week out of Geno Smith and really just this neutered passing game, guys, doesn't give me a lot of confidence in any of these wide receivers because we saw Geno post the second lowest average target depth in a single game of the 2025 season. The beneficiary, accordingly, actually was Michael Mayer, who they were using a lot to chip block and then just kind of released as the check down valve, wound up getting a team high 7 targets for his trouble. So again, if Njoku's out, I prefer Harold Fannin as my streaming tight end of this week. I also think Cade Otton, if we are seeing, again, all those Buccaneers wide receivers out in that potential shootout against the Lions, he probably deserves that second nod. But if you're still trying to claw your way to find a tight end on the waiver wire, I do think Michael Mayer would go ahead and be the 3rd best option there. Again, very talented guy, and just the way they want to use him right now as a check down option, it gives me more confidence in that PPR friendly floor, despite the fact that the Chiefs have been pretty good against tight ends this season. So good stuff there, Freedman. Plenty of more games to get to. First, though, a quick word to our friends over at Mike's Hard Lemonade. Look, guys, if you're deep in the fantasy trenches like us, you already know how to win it all. You've got to go hard, and Fantasy HQ, powered by Mike's Hard Lemonade, is the ultimate tool for fantasy sickos. From managing all your fantasy leagues in one place to receiving personalized expert advice, dominate your fantasy season by using Fantasy HQ and by enjoying a Mike's Hard Lemonade while sweating your matchups on Sundays. You can check out Fantasy HQ at fantasylife.com and find Mike's nearest you at mikeshard.com. Nobody makes lemonade like Mike's. Note that Mike's is hard, so is prison. Don't drive drunk. Premium malt beverage with flavors, all registered trademarks used under license by Mike's Hard Lemonade Company in Chicago, Illinois. We're breaking down every single Week 7 matchup here on the Fantasy Life Show, and let's go ahead and continue doing that, Mr. Freedman. With our 9:30 a.m. London kickoff, we got the Jaguars facing the Rams, who are sitting as 3-point favorites. Game total resting here at 45, and relative to what we've seen over the last few weeks, actually a good potential matchup there overseas. Want to start off though with the Jaguars, Freedman. Again, a team who overall has played some good football and had some nice wins. Maybe left a little bit to be desired though in terms of their offensive firepower.
Ian, how dare you suggest that any game played abroad is not a top tier NFL contest? But yes, be that as it may, the Jags against the Rams. No team has played abroad more than the Jags. If any team has an overseas home field advantage, it is them. And if you look in the game model we have at Fantasy Life, we do have the Jags as a 4-star bet, primarily because of the injuries to the Rams. But the guy I'm looking at for the Jags is Brian Thomas Jr. He bounced back last week, 90 yards and a touchdown on 10 targets, and missed out on another long touchdown because of random penalty. If you take out his terrible first couple of weeks of the season, 9.4 yards per target, on pace for almost 1,200 yards receiving. That's not bad. That's basically pretty close or just slightly diminished version of what he was last year, 9.6 yards per target and almost 1,300 yards. So not quite on par with the guy he was last year, but also not that far off. And I know sometimes it's like, oh, do you want to like cherry pick and just take out his bad games? But, a new offensive head coach coming in, there was something weird going on with Brian Thomas Jr. in weeks 1 through 2. But since then, it seems like he's basically back to himself, just slightly not as good as he was last year, but certainly good enough to be started every week. And then going against the undersized cornerbacks of the Rams, who are without Akello Weatherspoon, he does intrigue me this week.
And again, those numbers would be even better if that 54-yard touchdown hadn't been nullified by Travis Hunter, just simply lining up offsides. Over with those Rams, though, guys, unfortunately, again, not expecting Puka Nacua to suit up in this one with that ankle injury. Look, Devontae Adams was already a staple in starting lineups anyway, as is Kyron Williams. So if we are trying to find a beneficiary throughout all this, I do think it's going to be Jordan Whittington over guys like Tutu Atwell and the tight ends involved here. Now, we have seen actually Whittington start, 3 games without Puka Nacua. He had a couple games at the beginning of last year, but wasn't yet a starter. In those 3 games, guys, 6 catches for 62 yards, 7 catches for 89 yards, and 3 catches for 86 yards. I think this is going to be the dude benefiting more from Puka being out than anyone else, primarily because he's the only other wide receiver they actually like using in those lower A-dot areas of the field where Puka gets a lot of his receptions. So again, homeless man's version of Puka here, okay? I have Whittington ranked as my wide receiver 46 this week, and that is the highest of any Fantasy Life ranker. But if you are like me and you're in some of these gross 14-team leagues and you got 2 or 3 flexes, I do think Whittington can make a lot of sense to, again, try to get you through the week here. So feeling good about it. Jacksonville has been very good against slot receivers. Shout out to Jordan Lewis. So not a layup matchup. And, I'm sure I'm going to get some start-sit questions where it's actually, a good like T. Higgins sort of wide receiver. No, please don't go out of your way to start Whittington. But again, beggars can't be choosers in some of these leagues. I do think Whittington could help a lot of people out. Let's talk about the Cardinals hosting the Packers. Freedman, Green Bay sitting at 6.5-point road favorites. Honestly, I'm surprised that number isn't like 21 points. Now, I am also a lifelong losing gambler, so take that for what it's worth. Game total resting at 44.5. But you do want to talk about the Cardinals, Freedman, an offense that, again, very, very banged up. Not sure about Kyler Murray or Marvin Harrison Jr.'s status at this point.
Yeah, I mean, the Cardinals lost to the Titans. That basically says everything. And they lost in ignominious fashion. They probably should be like 10-point underdogs in this spot. But yeah, let's look at the Cardinals. I expect Marvin Harrison to be out. And maybe there's no Kyler Murray, although at this point, I do think it's likelier than not that he plays. But Jacoby Brissett looked like the better passer last week. And if it's Brissett again, and if Harrison is out, the main thing is if Harrison is out, I think it's really big for tight end Trey McBride, who would probably be in a tier of his own at the top of our tight end ranks. 11 targets last week, 8 receptions, 72 yards. And this is like a thing now. he somehow scores touchdowns. He scored 1 last week, scored 2 in the past month. The big, bigaboo with McBride in previous seasons has been an inability to score touchdowns, like going back all the way to high school. I'm not saying he is like now Gronkowski in his ability to find the end zone, but at least he's like not zero in that category anymore. So Trey Harrison, if Marvin Harrison is out, Trey McBride, if Marvin Harrison is out, I think is like a no-brain lock as the number 1 tight end for the slate.
Would be a nice little bump for Zay Jones too, although again, not someone who's going to be rocketing up into a must-start territory or anything like that. Over with the Packers, loving life with Josh Jacobs. Tucker Kraft, Dwayne, I talked about yesterday, would be cool if he had more volume, but I just want to shine some light on Jordan Love and maybe, just maybe, guys, his potential to capture MVP honors. Still is a way to go and everything. We are only in week 7 after all, but plus 2,000 odds, that does feel, pretty low to me. We got guys like Stafford, Jared Goff, Drake May with better odds. And just, again, some of the differences between Baker Mayfield and Jordan Love, I know are pronounced right now, but I do wonder over the course of an 18-week season if we could see those odds, slim down quite a bit. Just like Baker Mayfield, Jordan Love's been dealing with a ton of injuries to his wide receiver room and even offensive line. And just like Baker Mayfield, he's continued balling out regardless. Save for that one disappointing performance against the Browns, I know we've still seen Jordan Love, even including that one, post top 5 numbers pretty much across the board. So plus 2,000 odds, guys, for Jordan Love right now MVP. I will be sprinkling some of my hard-earned doll hairs on that one because, again, I just think the Packers very well could be the best team in a pretty wide open NFC. And we do usually just, again, see the MVP go to a quarterback putting up big time numbers on one of the best teams. 2 things that, again, Jordan Love certainly seems to be able to check. Let's talk about maybe 2 of the other better teams in the NFC, Freedman. The Vikings hosting the Eagles. The Eagles are sitting there as 2.5-point road favorites. The game total is resting at 43.5 points. So as you said before, not exactly sure who's going to be under center for Minnesota, but just as things stand right now for week 7 in 2025, probably would be a slight advantage to have Carson Wentz still out there.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think the team flips back to J.J. McCarthy this week. And I mean, to state the obvious, that's probably not good for the pass catchers. Maybe it doesn't hurt Jordan Mason quite as much as it hurts the pass catchers, because if McCarthy is out there, I think the team is going to funnel through the backfield, specifically the running game. And that makes sense. JJ McCarthy has not proven himself to be a strong NFL passer to this point, and going against a very strong defense in the Eagles against the pass. However, like in a low-key fashion, the Eagles have been pretty bad in run defense this year. They're number 29 in rush success rate. I think it could be a Jordan Mason day if McCarthy doesn't drag the entire offense down with ineptitude play. So I am looking at Jordan Mason, but it's all sort of predicated on the idea that JJ McCarthy is not a bad quarterback, which at this point, we kind of don't know if that's the case.
At least one more week, seemingly, where Mason's going to get to control his backfield until Aaron Jones could be back from IR. We did just get a quote from JJ McCarthy on his injured ankle. Quote, "It's getting there. I wouldn't say it's 100%. We've got to be smart and understand there's a lot of things that go on. I'm just going to do what I'm told and try to get better." I don't know. Freeman doesn't exactly sound like the most resounding quote from a quarterback expecting to be out there. So we will see. Maybe we do, in fact, get a Carson Wentz revenge game here against the Eagles. Speaking of those Eagles, man, like we talked about the passing game and, just kind of the overall lackluster performance of this offense, but just Saquon really not even coming close to booming, guys, really has been shocking to me. This man is averaging fewer PPR points per game than DeAndre Swift, who Eagles fans have not had, enough bad things to say about over the years. Of course, I know Saquon is still very much a better real life running back on his worst day than Swift has ever been. I'm not here to make that argument, but it really has just been rough, guys. 3.4 yards per carry for Saquon this season. 1 year after averaging a career high 5.8 yards per rush. His long run is only 18 at this point. So just haven't seen the big plays. But I do think a lot of it just goes to the performance of this banged up offensive line, because the Eagles from 2021 to 2024 were literally the league's best offense in terms of RB rush yards before contact per carry. This year, though, sunk all the way down to 16. So we'll see what happens. Again, hopefully Saquon, just hopefully gets his legs back under him. Offensive line health improves. Maybe this is the week, though, that we start getting some of those familiar boons, because similar to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, in that actually I say the opposite to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Vikings are very, very good against the pass. They're first in EPA allowed per dropback, 25th though in EPA per rush. So again, Saquon, I don't think he magically became bad at football or anything. Hopefully this defense is the unit that can bring out some better days from him. Before we move on, guys, I did want to go ahead and invite you to get a free year of Fantasy Life Plus. That seems pretty cool. And to do so, all you have to do is go to fantasylife.com/comment. You will download the comment browser by Perplexity. And again, get a full year of Fantasy Life Plus for free. So only takes about 2 minutes to do so. We have a how-to guide on the website. You can find a link in the description. But yeah, I guarantee you we will not offer a better deal than this. 12 months of Fantasy Life Plus for free. Go ahead and check it out at fantasylife.com/comment. Moving back along, Freedman, we got the Jets hosting the Panthers. Panthers sitting as 2-point road favorites, 3-3 on the year. Some clutch play from Bryce Young recently. Also, Rico Dowdle doing his thing. So game total resting at 42.5. And accordingly, you do want to talk about Rico Dowdle, who again will probably have to fend off a returning Chuba Hubbard in this one.
Yeah, just kind of big picture, how bad do the Jets have to be? And I guess maybe combined with that, like how ascendant are the Panthers? And that the Panthers, like I would say pretty cleanly, you look at them and think, they're one of like the worst 8 teams, maybe one of the worst 5 teams in the league. And yet on the road, they're favored against the Jets, who just seem to have no idea. But looking at Rico Dowdle, I know Chuba Hubbard has a really good chance of returning this week. I look at Dowdle and what he has done the past couple of weeks, and Chuba Hubbard was fine last year, but he was an accumulator. And he basically had production that was on par with what Rico Dowdle did last year. I don't see why Dowdle couldn't overtake him. And I mean, the matchup going against a Jets team that is just falling apart, I think it's a really nice spot. Now, I do want to contextualize what Rico Dowdle did last week. He was at home, where the Panthers have had a really big home field advantage for the past 5 years, and he was playing against the Dolphins and the Cowboys, 2 of the worst run defenses in the league. But as you mentioned, the Panthers are favored. They've really been leaning into the running game so far, and the Jets coming back from London after playing and losing a really close game there, I think the Jets could kind of be weary. So it's another situation where I think Dowdle, obviously highly unlikely to go off for 200 yards, but I think he's really going to get a shot to be the lead back. So basically flip it. Chuba Hubbard before this injury was getting 2 series to every 1 series for Dowdle. I think that flips. And if Dowdle continues to do what he's done, I think they just ride that hot hand. So I think Dowdle has a real shot to continue to run wild.
Again, not going to be able to rank him as that top 10 running back that he would be without Chuba, but still have a feeling he's going to be safely inside our top 24 as we get those ranks updated. Over with, again, the winless Jets. I know last week, and honestly the Bills game as well, like 2 of the worst statistical, passing performances of the season do belong to Justin Fields. And guys, he is still a low-end QB1 in fantasy land because guess what? Sometimes fantasy football is stupid, particularly with rushing quarterbacks. So again, 2 horrible performances, but also performances in between those as a QB2, QB4, and QB7. And he did throw for 218, 226, and 283 yards in those performances. Remember, guys, fantasy points and garbage time do count the same as the rest of the game. And accordingly, I do think Mason Taylor could now be the big time beneficiary with Garrett Wilson likely sidelined here for a week or 2. So Mason Taylor over these next 2 weeks before the Jets bye actually gets to feast on the 31st and 32nd ranked defenses in the Panthers and the Bengals in terms of PPR points per game allowed to position. I know last week was a dud. How could it not be a dud when your quarterback throws for 45 freaking passing yards? Mason Taylor is still someone that has flashed and again now sets up as the only reliable, if you can say reliable, pass game option in New York. Let's move on, Freedman. We got the Titans hosting the Patriots in the Mike Vrabel revenge game here in New England, sitting as 7-point road faves. The game total resting here at 42. So honestly, again, just the only thing that worries me here, Freeman, is the fact that I think sometimes when teams fire their head coach, they almost get like a new breath of life, kind of in them. But just in terms of on paper stuff, I don't know how the Patriots don't roll here.
Yeah, absolutely agree with you. And I think it's a situation where Vrabel will absolutely want to hammer the Titans. And I think that hammer is going to be Ramondre Stevenson. Like, I think he's going to want to just outman and impose will on the Titans. And that is like Ramondre Stevenson. That's what he does. And without Antonio Gibson, Stevenson had a season high 71% snap rate and 54% rush share last week. Now, of course, pretty ugly. He had only 18 yards on 13 carries and a target, but still, he was the lead back. And then now he's going against the Titans, who are number 2 in largest fantasy boost allowed to running backs. They're without their defensive tackle, Tavondre Sweat, and maybe they will be without Arden Key and Olu Oladeju at the edge position on the defensive line as well. So a bad run defense anyway, that is also missing some key players in the front seven. So I do think it's a spot where the Patriots are going to roll. The Titans, with that bad run defense, are just going to give it up to one of these running backs on the Patriots. And sadly to say, I do not think it's going to be Travion Henderson. I think it will be Ramondre Stevenson.
Speaking of running backs over at the Titans, again, really would urge everyone to try to go ahead and stash Tajay Spears on that bench if possible. Obviously offers handcuff upside, but also Tony Pollard is someone where if he was traded here in the next few weeks, wouldn't be the most surprising thing in the world. So can't really start either guy with confidence at the moment. We still do slightly prefer Pollard, but very, very tough run defense for New England this year. Would not be going out of my way to start him if at all possible. Honestly, the only guy, and you can't even feel great about it, but Alec Aomanor are probably benefiting from Calvin Ridley presumably missing some time with a hamstring injury. To Aomanor's credit, he's flashed a little bit this year. We've seen some trust from Cam Ward on those honestly kind of reckless, he's back across the field, but Aomanor has certainly made a few plays out there. My wide receiver 40 on the week. Freeman's even higher at wide receiver 34. Again, just a matter at this point where someone who is projecting for 8 to 10 targets out there can only rank them so low. So not going out of my way to start the guy, but again, in this sad dumpster fire of a Titans offense, I do think he would be the one guy to go ahead and give a small hat tip to. Let's move on to the late Monday Night Football game. Still a pretty good one, though, Freedman. I hate the 10 p.m. kickoffs and everything as much as the next East Coaster, but still, we got the Seahawks hosting the Texans. Seattle sitting as 3.5-point home favorites. The game total resting, though, at a lowly 41 between two defenses that Houston's, always been good. Seattle usually good when they're not super banged up. That said, that secondary is not healthy right now, Freedman, so maybe CJ Stroud and company can get something going here.
Yeah, I'm looking at the Fantasy Life game model, and the Texans are a 5-star bet. The Texans are coming off of the bye. They are traveling, but travel isn't as big of an issue for a team coming off of the bye because you don't have the cumulative impact of travel. And then you look at the Seahawks, who used to have an amazing home field advantage, the best home field advantage in the league. Now they have one of the league's worst home field advantages over the past 5 years. And then you look at that secondary, which you mentioned. Cornerback Devin Witherspoon plays in the slot. He was out for weeks 2 and 3, played in week 4, did not play in weeks 5 and 6. So we have to monitor him. And then on the perimeter, cornerback Tariq Woolen was out last week with a concussion, did not clear the protocol last week. We have to see where he is this week. And then free safety Julian Love with a hamstring injury was out in week 3, did not play in weeks 5 and 6. So if some of these guys return, then that obviously shifts things towards the Seahawks. But if those guys are out again, you have CJ Stroud and Nico Collins coming off of the bye. I think both of those guys would be in great positions.
Certainly do like that bet as well. Because, come on, guys. We're staying up till probably 1 a.m. on Monday night. We got to have a little bit of money on the game there. Over on the Seahawks, though, really just want to shout out this backfield. Because, again, Sam Darnold is doing his thing, obviously, and Jackson Smith and Jigba, probably the front runner for Offensive Player of the Year, particularly if Puka's going to be missing some time. But, man, Kenneth Walker versus Zach Charbonnet is dominating some of the discourse in the fantasy streets because we all want Kenneth Walker to get the ball more because, let's face it, he's been much better with his opportunities than Charbonnet this year. There's been this idea that Walker's more of this boomer bust, either going to get you 20 yards or 0 yards sort of back. Whereas with Zach Charbonnet is more of the, okay, if you need 3 yards, he'll get you 3. If you need 4 yards, he'll get you 3. But that really hasn't even been the case this year, guys. Okay. Yes, Charbonnet has not been explosive. He actually has the third worst, worst explosive play rate on the season. Walker has the third best, but even stuff rate, guys, which yes, Walker is bad at, and stuff rate, by the way, percentage of carries where you gain 0 or negative yards. Zach Charbonnet's the worst in the league in that as well. So I know he's gotten more carries in the red zone and stuff. So obviously defense stacking the box. But for next gen stats, both Walker and Charbonnet have faced at least A+ defenders in the box on the same rate, 40% of their carries this year. So I don't exactly get it. That said, the Seahawks are winning football games. They know more about football than I do, and they clearly do want to go ahead and split this load up and continue to keep Charbonnet plenty involved. Jeremy Fowler said as much in an ESPN report. So it sucks, guys. Obviously don't cut either guy because we are one injury to either dude away from rocketing up the healthy back inside of our top 12. For now, though, neither Walker nor Charbonnet are actually in our fantasy life consensus top 24, particularly ahead of a tough matchup against that ferocious Houston Texans front seven. Two more matchups, Freedman. We got the Browns hosting the Dolphins here in Cleveland. This actually could be a weather game. Keep an eye on some of the rain and wind stuff. Always invite you guys to check out rotogrinders.com. Kevin Roth does a great job updating us throughout the week. But yeah, Browns sitting as 3-point home favorites, game total at 40.5. And, you were saying before, Freedman, like, man, how bad the Jets have to be for, the Panthers to be favored in that one. How bad the Dolphins have to be for the Browns to be favored here?
Yeah, it's amazing the coaching staff for the Dolphins hasn't been fired to this point. But I mean, you could also maybe say the same thing about the Browns. But I mean, a number of guys to look at in this game. Jerry Jeudy has 9 targets per game since week 4, which is when number 2 wide receiver Cedric Tillman exited with a hamstring injury. Obviously, Harold Fannin, we mentioned him earlier, 10 targets last week is what he saw with David Njoku in and out of the lineup. But the guy who really stands out to me is Quinshon Judkins. I mean, the dude has 374 yards and 2 touchdowns over the past 4 games, and the Browns have a minus 39 point differential in those games combined. Just think about what that dude could do if the Browns were winning a game, right? And then on top of that, he has the matchup against the Dolphins, who are number 30 in defensive rush EPA. Over the past 2 weeks, the Dolphins have made Rico Dowdle and Kamani Vidal look like superstars. Nothing against those 2 guys, but if they can do it against the Dolphins, I think the second round rookie can also do it. So with a run-leaning game script, an advantageous matchup, I think Judkins legitimately has the opportunity for like 30 plus opportunities in this game. So I think it is a big spot for the young guy.
Freedman's got Judkins as his RB8 overall. That's the highest of any ranker. We also all got him inside the top 12, but yes, very much shaping up to be a boom spot there for the Ohio State product. Over with the Dolphins, just want to give a shout out to Darren Waller, guys, and how awesome he has been this year. Completely surprising to me. He's caught 10 of his 12 targets for 117 yards and 4 touchdowns. He's got more PPR points in 3 games than TJ Hawkinson and Evan Ingram have in 5. Overall, just in terms of PPR points per game, Waller is the tight end 2 on the season, behind only Jake Ferguson. And we actually have started to see his routes catch up to that production. Okay, obviously unsustainable at first, caught like 2 touchdowns on only a handful of routes in that game against the Jets. But man, 36% route rate in that game, up to 68% in the next one, and then last week all the way up there 78%. So yeah, a little bit of a fluky touchdown last week, got left alone, after running through the Charger zone and everything. But man, just a situation where there's Jalen Waddle in this offense, and then there's pretty much nobody else preventing Darren Waller from getting force-fed the football. So again, I mentioned briefly earlier, but we do have some even trade murmurs going around about Jalen Waddle. I have no idea why the Dolphins would do that, but could you imagine the weekly projections for Waller if that somehow was the case? Would be out of this world. So consensus tight end 7 guys, the only guys we are starting ahead of Darren Waller this week: Trey McBride, Tyler Warren, Jake Ferguson, George Kittle if active, Tucker Kraft, and Sam Laporta. Freedman, let's close things out with the Broncos hosting the Giants in Mile High. Denver sitting as 7-point home favorites. Game total, though, resting at a lowly 42.5. That's why we are talking about them last. Talk about the Broncos, Freedman, and what you're looking for in this offense.
Yeah, one more time mentioning the fantasy life game model. So the Giants have 3 extra days of rest. The Broncos are at a pretty big travel disadvantage coming back from London, but all of that is outweighed by the legit home field advantage that the Broncos have, top 2 over the past year and over the past 5 years. And that's a home field advantage that is amplified because the Giants are in a different division. They're in a different conference, and they play on turf instead of grass. So the Broncos in the game model are a 5-star bet. And on the player level, I really like J.K. Dobbins this week. He didn't do a lot last week, 40 yards, no touchdowns, but it was his second straight game on the road and the 4th game on the road in 5 weeks. He was in London. He still had 15 opportunities, and in his 5 prior games, he looked good with 425 yards and 4 touchdowns. This week, at home is a 7-point favorite going against the Giants, who are number 31 in defensive rush DVOA. Just a really good spot for the veteran here. So I think he goes off.
Fantasy Live consensus, RB18 ahead of guys like Travis Etienne, DeAndre Swift, Jalen Warren, Kamani Vidal, amongst others. Over with the Giants. Again, Jackson Dart obviously be a very tough test here. Does have the running to still be a top 15 quarterback in my opinion, but yeah, not going to be the easiest stretch. So feeling good about Cam Scatterboot. I think the only other guy, with all due respect to streamer Theo Johnson, is going to be Wan'Dale Robinson here. So yeah, we got big Jordan Humphrey doing his thing out there, but if Darius Slayton is going to be, once again, joining Malik Neighbors on the sideline, don't be surprised if Wan'Dale Robinson is again the featured pass catcher. And I do not think he's going to have the usual disadvantage of seeing a ton of Patrick Surtain in this one. Looking at Surtain snaps this year, only averaging 5.5 per game in the slot, never had more than 9 out there. So I really would be shocked to see Surtain deployed full-time in the slot against Wan'Dale. To be fair, we have seen Wan'Dale play a little bit more outside since that Neighbors injury, so it's not like this 90% chance of just him never seeing him or anything quite like that. But hey, Wan'Dale's shown a little bit more ability to get downfield this season. I just think, again, looking at this offense, particularly in the first couple of drives when the Giants have been pretty lights out, honestly, still running through that script, I do think Wan'Dale is good enough to make some good things happen here. And accordingly, it makes sense to me that the Broncos have allowed the 8th most targets on the season to opposing slot receivers because, yeah, quarterbacks are trying to avoid throwing at PS2. That's going to wrap up this edition of the Fantasy Life Show, guys. Hope you enjoyed the new format. If you do like the show, then please like the show. Always help when you subscribe. And God forbid, leave us a nice review. That would be wonderful. So for Freedman, for producer Matt, for producer Kelsey, I'm Ian. Thanks again for tuning in. And until next time, take care, everybody.